morning. My name is Miss Hillman and this is my colleague Miss Bowditch. We're here on behalf of Esquire Property Services to discuss the dismissal of Susan Perkins.
Okay, we'll just introduce ourselves. I'm Mr. Smith and this is Mr. Frost, and we represent Miss Susan Perkins for Fit and Able laws.
We've set an agenda today based on two issues that we've highlighted that we think need to be discussed. Firstly, the issue of Susan's dismissal, and secondly, the issue of her redundancy pay. Are you happy to deal with them in that order?
Yeah, sure, we're happy.
Okay, so the first issue was of Susan's dismissal. We're aware that Susan Perkins is under the impression that she was unfairly dismissed. What are Susan's reasons for this? Why is she coming with this claim?
Well, we've had a good look and we have generally found that there's been some kind of workplace issues. Okay. So you'll probably be aware of the ACAS rules. Like, I'm sure with a claim like this you would have found these. They're basically guidelines for the Trade Unions and Labour Relations Act. So basically they just give guidelines on things such as discrimination in the workplace, equality in the workplace. I've printed some things off that I think are quite relevant. One thing we would like to ask you is if you could explain, please, why Susan was the only woman in the office.
We don't have the information to hand as to why. We're just aware that she was, unfortunately.
Okay. I mean, you can understand from our point of view that the information we have is that she was the only female in a dominated male office. She was let go by her boss, who was a male. She then appealed to a board member who was a male. We wanted to know if she was ever given the opportunity to possibly talk to, or even appeal to a female member of staff.
And with regards to that, we're not aware of any opportunities of her speaking to females. I don't know if that was because there were no females in the office above her stage of agency and above her manager, Calvin Marco.
Okay.
But to just put it in perspective, she's one of 5 agents working in the office. 4 of those are male, and she is the female. But just to put it in perspective, it's not an office where there's 30 people working.
Sure.
And she's the only female.
I'd like to just say that I know we're not here today to talk about what a court would decide, but I think we've already shown that we've got a very strong foothold in this case, and we feel that we've got the stronger side of the case almost, and that should reflect in how we're going to start the bargaining process.
Okay.
So we're wondering what your stance on the on what you'd be prepared to offer at this stage was.
Well, just to go through a few more of the facts, I understand you said that you feel your client has a strong case. We would disagree respectfully. Looking at the facts that we've been given by our client, Esquire Property Services, that Mr. Marco was actually told by a higher authority that he needed to lose 1 member of staff. He wasn't told that he needed to lose a female. He was told if he needed to lose 1 member, and he chose that person based on the firm's aptitude test. And the reason that Susan was actually selected was nothing to do with her sex, but it was to do with her poor score on the aptitude test. So we would suggest that, in fact, Susan has no evidence, and relying on the fact that she was the only female in the office, we would say would make it a very weak case, and our client does strongly disagree that she was unfairly dismissed based on her sex.
Could I just ask a question about the aptitude test scores? Am I right in thinking that some of the criteria for the aptitude test included aptitude and attendance?
Yes, it did.
What we're suggesting actually is that our client believes that her work ethic and attendance actually speak for themselves. I'm sure that Mr. Marco was made aware of this. However, I was wondering if you could explain the discrepancies in the results for us.
Yes, of course. With regards to the aptitude test, the reasons that she was selected is although she has very good, she's been recognised as being very good at the letting side of her job, she wasn't as good as the sales side, which is what she scored lowest in for her aptitude test, and it's the sales is actually more lucrative to her position.
Would you agree that Susan was actually asked by Mr. Marco to concentrate on her lettings?
Because also previously we've got information that she was actually outperforming in sales before she was asked to move to letting. So obviously you can see that it was almost by way of asking her to change her approach as a reason for the low sales.
We're not aware of that, but we're not aware of what her previous role was within the sales department. However, just to continue with the reasons that the aptitude test was scored low, sorry, I just wanted to clarify, was that she also had a negative attitude towards her administrative tasks, and we did actually receive a letter of complaint about Mrs. Perkins' attitude at work from clients that were renting the property. So this has all been culminated, and that is the reasons that she's been dismissed. So it's not based necessarily on her sex, but actually if we look at the facts, it's more to do with the fact that she wasn't actually achieving as well as she obviously perceived herself to be achieving within the workplace.
Would you agree that perhaps attitude would link to a work ethic?
I don't think we can really comment too much. We have been given some information by our client, but as you can appreciate, we haven't been given everything that went on a daily basis. From the information that he has given us, we are aware that other branches were told to lose staff as well, not just the Bristol office. There was a Taunton and a Yeovil office that were told to lose staff, and in fact they were chosen, I think, in a similar way based on the aptitude test, and they were actually both male. So again, our client would suggest that they are not discriminating against females, and they didn't in the case of Susan Perkins. I know that you've mentioned the idea of throwing some figures around in the air. What has been offered to Mrs. Perkins, along with the guidelines of what's expected, is her redundancy pay, and we've offered her 1 month's pay as redundant, for being made redundant because there was no longer a position available for her in that branch.
We understand the redundancy pay information, and we don't particularly have an issue with that amount as such, because she would have been expected to have been given that anyway. Our issue is with the compensation. Now, can you tell us the notice that she was given for redundancy?
So we aren't actually aware of the time scale surrounding her redundancy. We haven't been given that information. As far as we are aware, that our client has no issues with how she was made redundant. Is there something that your client wishes to bring up with regards
So
to...
we don't know the notice of redundancy?
No, we don't.
Okay.
No, unfortunately not. We'll certainly go back to our client and get that information.
Yeah, of course, I mean, that would be useful.
I think something that is important to make clear on behalf of our client at this stage is that our client is not authorised us to give any compensation by way of unfair dismissal, because he does not believe that there is grounds for Mrs. Perkins to bring a claim under unfair dismissal unless she has any overpowering evidence that you wish to bring to our attention at this point.
I think that, like we said, the case, we both feel, each side feels strongly. We feel strongly that there is a case of sexual discrimination, so we'd be prepared to almost talk it through, and then you could go to your client and then get authorisation for that. Because we're suggesting perhaps that she was not selected for the aptitude test, she was selected for other reasons. I mean, we've asked Susan and she said that she suffered from horse jokes from the male occupants, and that she didn't fit in with the surroundings, and we believe that's the reason why she's been selected instead of perhaps the aptitude criteria. So clearly we believe there is a claim, so we're looking for compensation.
Okay, well, on the grounds of compensation then, on behalf of our client, we would have to go back and discuss that with our client, because we haven't been actually given authorisation to agree to amount of compensation. We've obviously advised them that if it goes to court, what the range would be if there was to even in fact be found a claim for unfair dismissal.
Something that our client feels strongly about, as I'm sure does Mrs. Perkins, is that we don't want this to end up in a court situation. Our client does feel sorry for Mrs. Perkins and the situation that she's been put in. Obviously, redundancy still isn't an ideal situation because someone has lost a job. Our client has authorised us to offer an increase in the redundancy pay by way of compensation, however not on the basis that she was unfairly dismissed, and they would expect a letter or a statement from Susan advising that she will no longer be spreading these malicious rumours, because our client strongly disagrees that is what happened. Is that something that you think Mrs. Perkins would be...
Can I just reiterate, are you authorised to give?
We're not authorised to give compensation for unfair dismissal. However, our client will increase the redundancy pay and offer more redundancy than she's entitled to, on the basis that Mrs. Susan Perkins doesn't take this issue any further and accepts that she was fairly dismissed, but a gratuitous redundancy pay would be offered.
I think that we're just changing the wording around here to almost protect your company in publicity almost, and I think that you're going to have to pay us more for us to keep it quiet almost.
Well, of course, our client doesn't want a bad reputation, especially when there's no grounds for these claims, as our client sees. So, would your client be willing to accept a higher redundancy pay?
Yeah, we'd definitely be inclined to accept a higher, and then say drop the claims for sexual discrimination and just accept it was a fair redundancy. But obviously, that would come with an increased offer.
Of course.
If you just allow me to just bring up a few more points from the Advisory, Conciliation and Arbitration Service. There are guidelines on the government website for employers, and they advise that companies work to a 4/5 rule. Now, if I could just explain this to you, I'm not sure if you're aware. That means that for every 5 females, there'll be 4 males, or for every 4 males, there'll be 5 females, or vice versa, just so, you know, it keeps things equal. I'm sure you would agree that actually this is not the case whatsoever in your client's office. What we're suggesting actually is that this has led to some kind of underhand harassment which our client has therefore suffered. You know, I'm sure you could understand how our client might have felt in that kind of environment, and we feel strongly that we do have a case here. I mean, we're advised that, you know, sure, we'd love to settle today. That's not out of reach whatsoever, but at the same time, I would suggest that a court or, you know, anything like that is really going to see these facts as they are, and through researching and through preparing for this, we have built up quite a portfolio of what we would feel is fine for anything else.
We feel the court would look very favourably upon our side of the case.
Thank you. We'll take that into consideration. Obviously, as you said, you've built up a portfolio. We also have a portfolio of what has happened with respect to our client and the case that he builds in his defence. However, just to clarify the situation at hand at the moment, you are willing to discuss a higher rate of redundancy in order to forget about the charges of unfair dismissal, and I think it's fair to say that that would be in the interest of both of our clients. Your client's getting what they want, which is some sort of compensation for the fact that she's lost her job, and equally in respect of our client doesn't need to worry about their reputation, because obviously, as you can understand on our client's behalf, even if it doesn't get to court and there isn't a case, all of the publicity suggesting that there would be could have an impact on their business. Yes, so if we could move forward on the basis that we'll look into some figures.
Okay.
Please may I just ask how much you think your client's reputation is worth?
That's not something that we can put a figure on. I'm sure our client would put a very high figure on that.
They would.
It's priceless.
You think they would put a high figure on it?
Of course, our client does want their reputation maintained, but the underlying basis for that is not because they know they have a claim and they want to brush it under the carpet. It's because they feel strongly that there isn't a claim and they don't want their reputation damaged with no grounds. Our first offer from our client, which will be one of our only offers today, is that they're willing to give her 6 weeks initial redundancy pay, which we worked out a figure of 2,580 based on the government website. You've probably come to the same figure, and we're willing to increase that to 6 weeks pay at her working rate of over £600 a week. Obviously the government caps it at £400, giving us a figure of £4,038 in total to be paid to Mrs. Perkins.
Could you just repeat that figure, please?
£4,038, and that's at the working rate of, I think it was £6, I've got it written down here somewhere actually, and it's £673 and 7 pence roughly per week.
Okay, can I just raise that we've researched into how much a normal sex discrimination case would achieve in the court, and it's almost uncapped. There is no limit. But on this particular type of circumstance, we estimate that it's up to around 20,000 and between 17 and 20,000.
Well, that isn't a figure that our client would be willing to consider.
Can I just give the reasons for why I suggest that, sorry?
Yeah,
to get you off there, sorry. We feel that we've got a very strong case. The court is going to look very favourably upon us, as the environment of no women almost does suggest that there is a real prejudice against women in that environment. There is nothing that you can turn to particularly to suggest that there is any contrary evidence to there being sexual discrimination. That's why we've set our pricing so high, because we believe that that's a fair price for your company.
Okay, well, just to bring things into perspective, but as I said, she's one of 5 agents working in the office, and she's the only female out of those 5 agents. That doesn't mean to suggest that there aren't other females working in the office below or above or at management level. It just means out of the 5 agents working in that branch that she is 1 in 5. And as my colleague has already highlighted to you, 2 other members of staff were dropped from various other branches, and they were both male. So it's not just that females are being dropped, and I just want to reiterate the fact that she isn't the only person who's been made redundant. She's 1 in 3, and out of those 3, 2 of those were male.
I think something that's worth noting at this stage is obviously that figure that you've given there, you've suggested would be in a court scenario, and that would also be where the judge would find that there was a case, and a very, very strong case. Because our client disputes that, you imagine that they're not going to give you what a court would give them if they lost, because that would be them accepting there was a case which they
that's
strongly
why we're
deny.
here, because we are prepared to go slightly lower, because it is obviously a negotiation. I was just saying that's the highest limit, but to show where our first offer is going to come from, that's just fine. In the court, so we'd be prepared to go lower.
Something that our client has discussed, obviously you haven't accepted our first offer, but thank you for considering it anyway. Our second offer would be 10 weeks pay at her rate, not at the capped government rate. 10 weeks pay, which would work out at £6,730, but Mrs. Perkins would need a guaranteed signed statement that this would be no more comments, no more rumours in future at all, not just dropping the court case.
And in order to bring that into perspective, it's £4.30 per week statutory entitlement, and that's at the working, and her that's £430 per week, and we are actually offering £673.07 per week, which is a considerable increase.
Okay, thank you for that generous offer.
I think my colleague and I would both agree that you're still not touching anywhere near where we're thinking here. I get the impression that you're kind of trying to dodge a bullet. We've explained to you the situation of what will likely happen in court. I'm sure you agree that we as well as our client has made the most efforts in trying to keep this out of court, and that will reflect well on our behalf, obviously, if it comes to that point. I mean, in my eyes, it comes down to you're arguing that kind of she was let go because of the test results. But we've already discussed this, and the test results just do not add up. There's major discrepancies there, and I think you agree that kind of they're not a fair reflection of what Susan is capable of. We've already discussed this equality in the workplace issue. We believe this has led to harassment, and we haven't even touched upon things like our client list, which our client will go on with. There's obviously things there that you might like to consider, and obviously we know time's taken, so we'd quite like to get to an agreement.
Do you have a counter offer that you're willing to give? Obviously we've increased our first offer. Have you got a counter offer that you can come down below your original figure?
Well, having said what we have,
with the reasons we've given, I'd suggest perhaps not only a cash figure, but perhaps some sort of alternative arrangement, perhaps to do with the client list that we've got. Obviously, Susan's been in her job with your client for 6 years, so she's obviously got a substantial client base from her personal thing. So, would you be prepared to put a price on that? Perhaps include that within your offer to take the client list back with you to your firm?
I'm not authorised, unfortunately, to do anything other than a monetary.
Well, perhaps we could suggest it and then get authorisation as part of an offer, which could be acceptable.
I don't think that's if that's something our client had considered. I'm sure that they would have offered that so far. Obviously, that's going to take a lot of business away from our client, so the value of that client list will be very, very, very high. I'm anticipating that's something they would want to give away. Have you got a monetary offer other than this?
Yeah, well, in terms of an uncapped fee for sexual harassment, I mean, we're looking at something around £25,000 compensation, and obviously we would have to discuss client lists and things like that separately. But obviously that's our offer, and obviously you can see why the offer that you've put to us in the first place is nowhere near.
Your first offer was 17 to 20, and now you're saying it's 25, so you've increased.
Sorry, no, but I think that was just a slip of the tongue. Sorry. It's basically it was 20 to 17, but I think in the interest of being fair and trying, because that is of course what a court will settle, may I put forward perhaps £12,500 compensation, or if you like redundancy pay with the guarantee that our client will not go to the press or put any bad light on the situation. And also, obviously, employment's a big issue here. And we were wondering if perhaps Susan would be able to get a job in another firm within the Bristol region as perhaps part of to bring our offer down even further.
Okay. Well, with regard to everything you've said, and thank you for bringing those points to our attention, there is something that we would like to put onto the table and offer. With regards to a monetary sum, I don't think that we would want to go any higher than 10 weeks' pay, which comes to 6,730. However, something that we would like to suggest is that there is a position that has now become available at the branch in Exeter.
Fixed.
But that isn't full-time work, that's part-time work at 3 days a week. But those 3 days a week work isn't a massive reduction in the price that the wages that she would have been on per hour. The part-time work would get her 20,000 as a salary, and that would work out at approximately £1,500 a month. But if we were to offer her that position, it would be on the grounds that she signed something to say that she would spread no more rumours about the fact that she'd been unfairly dismissed. And that would be
I think the company is reluctant to have her back into the office if she continues these rumours and then goes into a different branch and starts these rumours. So that would be on a very strong basis that this document would be signed and no rumours were to be spread, and obviously that could future jeopardise her job in the Exeter branch if she does.
Yeah, apologies for that misreading. I got a bit lost in my words. But are you suggesting this deal along with a compensation deal?
We're suggesting the redundancy pay at 10 weeks from her old job if it's over £6,000.
£6,000.
It's 6,730, and then the offer of a new job in a different branch, part-time. Yes, it's on a lower salary, but obviously the redundancy pay is to reflect that she will now be getting an offer of employment going forward.
Okay, that seems, more in the ballpark figure we were thinking. We strongly believe that our client has proven herself in her performance, and we would suggest that actually, which would actually benefit both parties, I think, is if we could have some sort of bonus, performance-based bonus scheme, which we think is only going to be fair. You're trying to get us to sign a document which is going to basically keep our mouths shut. We're actually saying that that's kind of not really the road we want to go down. This is purely in our client's interest, and we just want to get the most for her. Obviously, having to travel, a good 45 minutes, whatever it's going to be, every day to get to work when she's got family commitments, school and things like that. We just want, maybe even this is going to cover travel costs. Maybe it's going to travel costs like that, and train or whatever it's going to be. Bus passes for her kids to get to school. We were wondering if we could just put that on the table for your consideration.
I would like to consider that. We'd have to discuss with our client the opportunity for bonuses at work, because obviously that's something that would affect the entire company.
Sure.
So that's not something that we would certainly not have the authority to agree to that. However, as we did say, there is going to be a sum of £6,730 there, which we would hope would compensate for the fact that she would have to travel further on top of the wage that she would be receiving. We would like to make a final offer to you, which would be...
The final offer that we had on the table is not a future employment with EPS, so to withdraw that offer of employment might not be suitable. We were expecting it might not be overly suitable, but a final offer of £12,500 redundancy pay, obviously the signed document, but no job going forward with EPS, and that really is our final offer because our client has not authorised us, and that's in a bid to settle today and not to let this go any further into a court situation.
A very generous offer. That is a good ballpark figure. But if we're not going to continue employment, we would like to have a good reference, and I'm aware at the moment that your company is not giving a good reference to us. So perhaps 12,500 plus for good reference, and we'll settle for that.
Yes, we can agree on that. Our client has authorised us. We can give her a good reference going forward with the 12,500 redundancy pay.
So if we could just clarify what we've come to an agreement on, the ballpoint figure of £12,500 in redundancy pay. There will be no further employment within the company, and there will be a signed statement from Susan Perkins to the effect of she was not unfairly dismissed and she will not be spreading any more rumours about such incidents, and finally that we will give her a good reference.
Perfect.
Wonderful, thank you very much.
Very good statement for
Thank
both
you.
our clients.
Thank you.